Hi, everyone. All right. I'm gonna wait about 5 minutes before I fully start, as I know June is still gonna be directing people to the video. But I just want to start by saying welcome. And yeah, we'll get started at about 2:05. Hi, June. If you're watching, feel free to comment in the live chat box. If you have any questions as we go through, we'll have a question period towards the end. But if there's any technical issues, I'll try and help figure that out as soon as possible. Yeah, and June is here as well, commenting if you have any questions for her as well. She's a great support, so she'll be there too. If you want to comment your name to say that you're here in the live chat box, it'll just pop up on the side just to see if who's all here watching. It's a little different than our regular Go Meet sessions, but we can still say hi to each other through that. Hi, Linda. Thanks for joining us again. Yeah, it says we have 6 people viewing. Hopefully more people will join. I know it was a little bit short notice today, since yesterday was a holiday, things are a little bit different this week. Okay. And this is something that we can post on our YouTube page as well. So we can come back to and rewatch this later if you want to go revisit anything that I talk about, or for people who miss it as well. We'll be posting this for sure. And just so you know, if you are commenting, then that can be viewed later as well with your name associated. Just to be mindful of that too. And this video is public right now as well, so yeah, okay. I think I'm going to get started then. Yeah, so welcome everyone. As I just said, we will be posting this video, so hopefully more people will be watching later. But we will be having a question period towards the end of this session. So if you comment your question about the topic, so we're talking about nutrition and immunity today. We're talking about nutrition and immunity. So if you have any questions about that topic or about nutrition stuff in general, please comment it in the live chat box on the side, and I'll come to that when we get to the time for questions. As well, if you have any suggestions for topics, or if you have any feedback for us, you can comment that as well. Or if you want to, you can also email June with any of that. And I'll have her email address available as well. I can post it. I can put it in the description of the video if just so people can have it as well for any feedback or questions. Yeah, so this session is designed for the Waterfront Neighbourhood Centre, and especially our seniors program, although it's open to anyone from our community, of course. So last week we did a Go Meet session where we talked about mental health and we talked about mindfulness, which was great because we know that right now we're going through some tough times, and that can be really hard on people's mental health. So it was great to talk to several of our community members about mental health and about how food and nutrition can affect that. So it was a really good session as well. And next week we'll be doing, I believe next week we'll be doing another session, although we don't have it completely confirmed yet. We will let you know through the email list that June has. But yeah, so a disclaimer before I fully start also is that because we're talking about health, I want to be clear that this session isn't meant to replace any health advice you may get from your practitioners, whether that's from your doctor or registered dietitian. So definitely defer to them first of all. And if you have any specific health concerns, you definitely want to bring that up with them. And I would encourage you not to bring up personal health concerns if you have other conditions or something like that in a session like this, as we want to keep that information as private as we can. So yeah. So nutrition and immunity, it's something I think that's on a lot of people's mind. We're thinking about our immune systems. We're thinking about how to protect ourselves as best as we can when we do have a pandemic going on right now, which I know all of us have that top of mind. So our immune function is really complex. It's really complicated. And there are many factors that can influence it, with nutrition being one of them. Of course, the number one way in this specific situation to keep ourselves healthy is to follow our public health guidance. So that means our physical distancing, staying 2 meters away from other people, wearing a mask if you're in public, washing your hands regularly. All of those things really take number one priority. But we do know that there are many other factors that can influence our immune function and our health as well. So that includes nutrition, but it also includes sleep, stress, and exercise as well. So these are all things that we can try and control, or we can try and affect in our own lives, that can also have a big impact on our health, both right now in terms of immunity and as well as those more long-term things as well. And I also want to make it very clear that when we're talking about nutrition, we're talking about the whole diet. There's no one single food that's going to cure a condition like COVID-19, and there's no one food that's going to prevent us from getting it either. And that includes things like supplements and even diets that we're going to talk pretty generally. But yeah, there's no one magic cure, unfortunately. I wish that there was. Okay, so today in this session, I'm going to go quickly through the basic biology of our immune system, how nutrients interact with that system, and then where we can find those nutrients in our food. And finally, easy ways to use those foods in our daily lives with some meal ideas. And then I'm going to take questions as well. So also, this session is going to be a little bit different from our Go Meet sessions because I actually can't share my screen, which is a thing that I didn't realize before. So sometimes I'll put up those like pictures so you can read along with me, but unfortunately with YouTube Live, I'm not able to do that without some very much more complicated technological support at this time. So you'll just have to listen and look at my face, I guess. So yeah, so starting with the biology part, our immune system can be divided into two main parts. We have the innate immune system, also known as the passive system. And then we also have the adaptive system, which is also known as the specific system. So this is important to know the distinction because the innate or the passive, I'll call it passive because that's a little bit easier to remember. The passive system includes barriers. So that's things like our skin and mucosal membranes in our like in our lungs and that kind of thing. Things that physically protect us from pathogens, which include viruses and bacteria. And then that system, the innate system, passive system, also includes some immune cells like neutrophils and some general white blood cells, which they react immediately to any invading pathogens, and they are very general. So they will just attack immediately, and but they aren't able to really identify different pathogens the way that the specific immune system can. So with the specific side, that has more of our specialized immune cells, so our B cells and our T cells. And these are important because our T cells include our memory T cells, which they are the ones that can remember when they've encountered a bacteria or a virus in the past. So they are what our vaccines are designed for. So the fact that our immune system has a memory is really important, as we know that our life, unfortunately, isn't going to be completely normal again until we have a vaccine. So making sure that that part of our immune system works really well so that the vaccine will work as well as possible in our bodies is also important. And obviously it's very complicated, and it's much more complicated than I'm going to explain right now. And I also don't have a degree in immunology, so it's not my specialty either. Much more talking about nutrition and food is. So we're going to stick to that. So with that in mind, I also will note that our immune system can naturally change as well. Unfortunately, as we age, our immune system kind of wears down. Inflammation is one thing that will increase over time, and it can negatively impact our immune system as well. And if we are experiencing any nutrient deficiencies, that can have a very significant impact negatively on our immune system as well. So we want to prevent that as much as we can. So I'm hoping that everyone got the handout from June in the email, because I'm going to be going through some vitamins and minerals as well as a macronutrient and talking about why it matters and where we can find it in our food as well as how much we need. So there are a lot of minerals and nutrients, including vitamins and minerals and specific macronutrients like protein that are really important to our immune function. So I'm going to list off a bunch: vitamin A, B6, B12, C, D, and E, all those vitamins. Iron, zinc, and folate are all really important for our immune function. I'm not going to talk about all of them today because that would take a lot of time, but also because some of these things we get lots of in our diet. So our food system actually has a lot of folate in it, and a lot of people get lots of vitamin C as well, between juices and even things like potatoes have lots of vitamin C. So those two we're not going to talk about very much because we do get lots of it in our diet normally. So we don't really need to specifically make sure that we're getting enough. Similarly, vitamin B6 and B12 play a slightly more minor role, as well as iron, in terms of immune function. So we're not going to focus on them today, although getting lots of them is important for other body functions as well. So today we're going to focus on vitamin A, vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, zinc, and protein. And I'll explain why. So there are two nutrients that Health Canada has approved for food labeling to have a health claim about immune function. And this is actually very important because Health Canada is extremely strict about what food labels are allowed to say in terms of claims about boosting your immune function and other health claims. So both vitamin A and zinc have an approved health claim by Health Canada for immune function. So that means that if a food has a sufficient amount of vitamin A or zinc, they can say on the package that that food is good for your immune system. And like I said, that's it's a very hard process to go through, and they review all of the science about nutrition and about some of the foods and themselves and how it's processed in your body. And so to get that approval really does show how strong that effect is. So vitamin A is important in both sides of the immune function that I described off the top when I was talking about the biology of the immune system. So unfortunately as well, there are some direct consequences from having a vitamin A deficiency, which isn't very common deficiency usually means you have such a low level that your body doesn't work as well without it. So it's very uncommon in Canada to have deficiency, but just to show what happens when you don't have enough, vitamin A, when you're deficient in it, can cause an impairment of the mucosal barriers. So it means that pathogens can get into your body more easily, as well as it impairs, when you don't have enough, it impairs the functioning of the passive immune cells. So those were the ones that are very general, things like neutrophils and lymphocytes and natural killer cells, the ones that are your immediate response to something unknown in your body. So if you don't have enough vitamin A, those kinds of things can happen, unfortunately. Then with vitamin D, it's also important to immune function, which isn't something that's talked about a lot. Usually when we talk about vitamin D from a nutrition perspective, we're talking about bone health, but it's actually very important for immune health as well, because it regulates inflammation. So one of the ways that your immune system can protect itself is by increasing inflammation. This is when it releases something called cytokines. When inflammation increases in your body, it's harder for the bad pathogens to survive. So it makes it a harder place for them to live. Unfortunately, it also is hard on our bodies. So if that's a longer term thing, then that can have a lot of negative consequences. So vitamin D is important as it actually can help reduce the inflammation that can be caused by the immune system. It also stimulates the secretion of antimicrobial substances from some of those general immune systems as well, immune cells as well, like our monocytes and natural killer cells, which protects the lungs from infection, which is really important too. Then for vitamin E, it serves a kind of similar purpose to vitamin D, but it protects the immune cells themselves actually from oxidative damage. So we hear a lot about antioxidants, and vitamin E is one of them. So it can protect from oxidation, which happens naturally over time. And then when you are deficient in vitamin E, that can cause impaired T cell function, which I mentioned before, that they're the part of your immune system that has a memory. And so if they're impaired, then the effectiveness of a thing like a vaccine could also decrease. So it's really important to have enough as well. And then moving on to zinc. So zinc is actually required for all cells that are regularly damaged and reproduced. So anything like our skin, which we all know can have a little bit of damage and heals quickly, anything like that that is exposed to the outer world is going to have to reproduce quickly. It's also called proliferation. You may see that on if you're looking more into the science behind it as well. But it's important for when we're repairing those cells and regenerating them. So many immune cells also, since they are attacking and fighting off these incoming pathogens, they often are killed and therefore they have to be replaced. So that's a frequent process that they have to be regenerated. So zinc is important for that process. And then when we are deficient in zinc, that can result in a decreased activity from immune cells like the memory cells that I talked about, and it can increase something called apoptosis as well, which is when our cells actually kind of self-destruct because they think that there's something wrong with them. So that's to do with the process of regeneration as well. And then last but not least, there's also the protein that I mentioned, and this is a macronutrient, so it's a bit different, but protein is really important for our whole body to keep our strength up and to both build and maintain muscle mass. It's talked about a lot in terms of, like getting more prominent muscles and things like that. But it's also important for muscles that help us breathe and help us do lots of things. So it's really important to have enough protein also so that we have the building blocks for lots of things in our bodies. For example, our hair is protein. And so if we don't have enough protein in our diet, then then we don't have enough of those building blocks for our body to make all the cells that we need and all the different parts of our body that require protein. So it's really important as well. I'm gonna grab some water. So that's kind of the background for some of the ways that nutrition can affect our immune system. And I want to encourage everyone watching that if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat box and I'll answer them as just towards the end of the session. And any question related to nutrition is totally fine, just as long as it's not related to your personal health. If you want clarity on something that I've said, if there's something that I didn't explain very well, feel free to ask in the chat box as well. Yeah. So going back to that handout that I'm hoping you all have a copy of from June, I kind of just went over the part that's under each of the headings of the 5 nutrients that I'm talking about today. But I'm also going to talk about where we can find these nutrients in our food as well. So that's the kind of the other side, the third column, where can we find it in our food? So for vitamin A, starting at the top again, our highest sources are in liver and dairy products and fish. And vitamin A is also known as beta carotene. And the reason why that name sounds like carrot is actually because we associate vitamin A with carrots because it's very high in beta carotene. It's all related. So carotenoids like beta carotene are found in high quantities in any fruit or vegetable that's dark green, yellow, orange, or red. So that includes things like our broccoli and spinach, but also our peppers, so bell peppers that are orange or red or yellow. They're also very high in carotenoids. Carrots, as I mentioned, sweet potatoes, they're all very high in vitamin A, which is great, as we talked about why that's important for our body earlier. And I'm going to talk more about it later, but we put out another community kitchen video today too on this same YouTube channel, which you can watch. And that's the video with Zahid, who is our community kitchen leader. And I know in her video, she added carrots and red bell peppers into the mix for making the meatballs. So that's one way that we can kind of add a little bit more of that into our diet as well. So then vitamin E. Vitamin E is found in, it's fat soluble, so it means that it is pretty much only found in fattier foods and especially in oils. So there are a lot of margarines that are made with vitamin E, and there are many vegetable oils that are naturally high in vitamin E, as well as nuts and seeds many of them are high in vitamin E, and the same thing is true if you're making a peanut butter or a sunflower seed butter or almond butter, those sorts of things. They'll still be high in vitamin E as well. So that one's a little bit more specialized, but it definitely can be found in our diet normally as well. And if you're cooking with an oil that's high in vitamin E, then you're going to be getting some of it every day, which is great. Then we have vitamin D. So this one's very different. I'm hoping that everyone is familiar with vitamin D, as that's the one that we get from the sun. So when the sun hits our skin, our skin's actually able to make vitamin D, which is amazing. Of course, we still want to be wearing sunscreen and everything to keep our skin safe, but it's a really amazing thing that our body can do. But it's not naturally occurring in very many foods. You can get it in some foods where it's added, and it does occur in a few. So some fish, egg yolks, and some dairy products are high in vitamin D, as well as some margarines and some of those plant-based milk beverages and yogurts also have vitamin D added, so that's great. And I'll talk about this again later, but because of the fact that we live in Canada and there isn't a lot of sun for almost half the year, it is recommended that people over the age of 50 take a vitamin D supplement every day of 400 international units as the dose. And that's a recommendation from Health Canada. It's very general. And I'll talk about that again later when I talk a little bit about supplementation. So next we have zinc. So the only mineral on this list. Our best sources of zinc are seafood, meat, seeds, and our beans, peas, and lentils as well. So you might notice that these are all great protein sources too. So most of our protein foods are also high in zinc, and many are also high in iron, which is something that I mentioned a little bit earlier, but it's important too. So zinc is one that is the other one that I mentioned that Health Canada has approved that health claim, because we know that that relationship between zinc in our food and our body's immune function is very strong. So that one's really important. And then it also directly leads into getting enough protein. So if you're having those zinc foods, then you're also going to be having a lot of the protein foods. So for proteins, we can divide them into plant proteins and animal proteins. So for our plant proteins, we have things like our beans, peas, and lentils. We have the chickpeas that Zahid put in her recipe in the community kitchen video. We also have things like soy, which is a great source of protein, as it's a complete protein. Same with quinoa. And we've talked about protein a lot in previous videos too. So I would encourage you to look back at some of the handouts that you may have gotten from June from past sessions about protein, as there's a lot of information there too about why it's important and where we can get lots of it. And then if we're thinking about our animal sources of protein, if you consume animal foods, then we have our meats, whether that's red meat or chicken, other kinds of poultry. We have fish, eggs, dairy, so that's our milk, our yogurt, our cheeses. All of those things are high in protein, and there's some protein in other foods too, in things like grains and vegetables and fruits. They all have a little bit as well, so it can all add up, which is great. And you may notice as well that there is actually some overlap in some of the foods that I've been talking about. So some of our foods like fish come up a lot in terms of these nutrients, because there's a lot of really important nutrients that we can find in pretty high quantities in a lot of fishes. So they're a great thing to add to our diet to make sure that we're getting lots of the nutrients that we need. So that's kind of our general, our nutrients that we need and where we can find them. But I know when I'm putting together information like this, I often think about how it must be really hard to try and think about food that way because a lot of us, when we're cooking, we're thinking about what tastes good together and we're thinking about how to make sure that we feel full after we eat. We're not really thinking about getting one specific nutrient. So, the really interesting thing about nutrition is that it can be really complicated, but it can also be very simple. So we can look at something like the Canada's Food Guide, which I'm hoping you're all familiar with. This is the new one from last year. So it's just the plate model. So it's a circle, and half of it is our vegetables and fruit. 1/4 of it is our protein foods, and another quarter of it is our whole grains. So this is a really good way to build a plate of food that we know will make sure that we get enough nutrients that we need for ourselves, for our bodies to be strong and healthy, including our immune system. So even though what I explained is very complicated, if you follow simple rules like having half your plate fruits and vegetables, 1/4 of our protein foods, and 1/4 of whole grains at every meal and snack, that can actually be a really easy way to make sure you're getting enough of all the nutrients that you need. If you have other health concerns, if you have uh, specifically things that affect your diet. So, for some people who may have some issues with their kidneys or have diabetes, those sorts of things, then those rules can change a little bit. But in general, eating in a way that has lots of fruits and vegetables and making sure you get enough protein is a really good way a really great way to follow to get enough nutrition. But I do want to highlight a few foods that I know I do get questions about sometimes too. So, nuts and seeds are one that, especially when we're thinking about snacking, because snacking can actually be a really good way to make our diet as nutritious as possible. When we're snacking, if we're having nuts and seeds, those are sources of lots of vitamins and minerals, as well as protein and some healthy fats. But it also has the vitamin E and the zinc that I was talking about in my list about the nutrition and the immune system as well. So it's great to include things like almonds and walnuts that are high in omega-3 fatty acids, which are great because they are really good for our heart as well. So they're a good way to add a snack into our day as well. And then, as well as I mentioned with fish, it's high in many important things, but vitamin A, vitamin D, zinc, and protein from the nutrients that we talked about today. Fish is a great source of all those things. So you could always build a meal around something like fish. So say if you wanted to have salmon, which is a great fatty fish, you could have it from frozen, so it's not quite as expensive, as I know money can be an issue for a lot of people right now, and at any time as well. And then if you wanted to have half of your plate, say you could do half of it to be broccoli and then to have a side salad. That's a really good way to have half of your meal to be fruits and vegetables. And then you could pair it with a whole grain. So that could be a wild rice blend. It could be quinoa. It could be a whole grain pasta if you really like pasta, that sort of thing. So you can kind of build your meal that way around a food that we know is high in a lot of the nutrients that support our immune function. Similarly, there's also dairy that I wanted to highlight. So that's high in our vitamin D and our protein. As we know, vitamin D was one of the ones that's really hard to get enough of in our diet because it's not very common. So if you're having, say, milk on cereal or like a soy milk or something like that every morning, then that's a really great way to include that in your diet every day too. And I did quickly want to go over the recipe from Zahid's video. I'm hoping that if you guys haven't seen it yet, that you'll go and watch it too, as she did a great job and it looks really delicious. So for the recipe that she made, it was the zucchini spaghetti with a tomato sauce and with chickpea meatballs. So it's a really interesting recipe that she made. And I believe that June also attached or sent that recipe out as well to everyone. So when you analyze that recipe, it's actually quite high in a lot of the vitamins and minerals that we're talking about today, as well as other ones that are important. So that the recipe is high in vitamin B6, vitamin A, and vitamin C, as well as vitamin E. It's high in zinc and iron, and it also has a lot of fiber, which is great, which makes sense because it has lots of zucchini and chickpeas, which is a plant protein, so it's got lots of fiber, as well as it has 21 grams of protein per serving, assuming that recipe is 3 servings. So that's a fair bit of protein for one recipe as well, which is great. And I know as well in that video, if you watch it through, Zahid also mentions adding things like cheese into that recipe. That'll increase the amount of calcium that you're getting, as well as a little bit more protein, which is great. Depending on what kind of cheese you're using, sometimes there's a lot of salt, so that can be something that you don't want to have too much of. But having a bit on top is definitely no problem. And I know she also used nutritional yeast in that video, and that's a great source of a lot of important vitamins like vitamin B12, which I haven't talked about really much in this video, but especially if you're following a vegetarian or vegan diet, that's a really great way to get some vitamins that are kind of hard to get in plant sources. All right. Well, that has been a lot of talking for me. But if anyone has any questions, if you can comment them in the live chat box, I'm going to give you guys a few minutes, and we'll wait a couple minutes before we start again, just to give you time to think about a question, if you have one. And like I said, you can always email June too if you don't feel comfortable commenting right now. Okay. So I don't have any questions so far from the chat box, which is totally okay. But I do have a question that comes up sometimes, that I just have as an example too. So with things like nutrition and immunity, since it is a very complicated topic, and a lot of people want kind of a shortcut into having good nutrition. So I do get questions about supplements. For immune function specifically, there aren't really any specific supplements that should be taken. Really, it's best to get all of our nutrition from our food if possible, and this is for a lot of different reasons. For one, when you're taking a supplement, you're losing everything else that's in that food. If you're just taking, say, a pill that has vitamin C, what you're losing is all of the something called phytonutrients, which are some like nutrients that aren't as well known that you're not getting, and we don't really know what impact that can have on our body. As well as, really importantly, you're not getting the fiber that you would be getting if you, say, got that from eating an orange or something like that. The other danger with supplementation, when you're taking like a pill form, is that it's really easy to take too much. So almost most vitamins and minerals have an upper limit that you're not supposed to have more than, which would be pretty much impossible to hit if you're just eating food. But if you're taking supplements, it can be just a pill or two away from going over the top, and which can be really dangerous, as there can be some side effects there. Some of them, it's not. Some of them can cause things like vomiting, that sort of thing, but others can be long-term complications that can increase things like that can be harmful to lots of different body systems. And then the one supplement that I already mentioned in this video that actually can be really good, especially here in Canada, is vitamin D. So Health Canada recommends that any person over 50 years of age take a 400 international unit supplement of vitamin D every day. So some people only like to take this in the winter, which is great, but you can take it all year round as well. I know, given that a lot of people can't really leave their homes much right now, and if you don't have a balcony, or if your balcony doesn't face in a way that gets very much sun, it can be really hard to get enough sun, and it's already hard to get vitamin D in sufficient quantities in our food. So taking a supplement with something like that can be useful. If you do want to start taking something like that, it's important to talk to your doctor or nurse practitioner or dietitian about that, because it's something that they need to know about. They need to know about any kind of supplements that you're taking so they can give you the best care that they can. Okay. If no one else has any other questions, I'm going to quickly recap what we've talked about. And then I'm going to give everyone a little bit of a challenge for until next week, when I hope that we'll be able to chat again and be able to check in and see how you're doing. So quickly going back over some of the things that we talked about today. We started off by talking about how immunity is really complicated, and there are a lot of different factors that can influence it, including our behaviors, things like sleep, stress, and exercise, as well as what we eat. And it's important to follow those public health recommendations, first of all. Doing things like physical distancing and washing our hands lots during the COVID-19 pandemic. And then we were talking about the biology of the immune system. So talking about how there's two different parts. We have our passive immunity and we have our specific immunity, and how they use different kinds of cells and different kind of defenses to help keep us as safe as we can be and as healthy as we can be. This includes things like our skin and even our saliva, but it also includes our white blood cells and some really specialized cells in our bodies that are amazingly complicated and rely on different nutrients as well to function as well as they can. And we were talking a little bit about the importance of vaccines as well, and keeping our immune immune system functioning well so that our vaccine will work as well as it can in our body. So the different vitamins, there are many vitamins and minerals that are important for our immune function, but today we talked about 5 nutrients. So vitamin A, vitamin E, vitamin D, zinc, and protein. So the 3 vitamins are important for different parts of our immune system as well as zinc. But protein is a little bit more general, where it's important to keep our whole body strong and in order to have all of the building blocks for different parts of our body as well. And there are some specific places where we can find these nutrients in our food. But in general, if you're eating a variety of foods and you're eating lots of specifically fruits and vegetables and protein foods, as well as our whole grains, then you're going to be getting lots of them, and you don't need to take a supplement or anything like that because you're going to be getting lots of it in your food. And the only one that's hard to get enough of in our food is vitamin D, which, as I was just talking about, if you're over the age of 50, you may want to take a supplement, but it's something you should talk to your primary health care provider or a registered dietitian about. And that is what we've talked about today in terms of nutrition and our immune system. So then I wanted to give you guys a challenge for everyone watching, and especially our Waterfront Neighbourhood Centre seniors and our community members. I want to challenge you all to try and spend at least 30 minutes in the sun this coming week. I know the weather's going to be pretty good, so try and spend some time in the sun with some skin exposed, wearing sunscreen, of course, to keep you safe, but to be able to get some sun, to get some vitamin D from the sun there. And I also want to challenge you all to have one time this week to have fatty fish. So that includes salmon, herring, mackerel, and sardines. So, and there are other ones as well, but those are kind of the better known ones. So one time this week, I want to challenge you all to have a meal based around one of those fatty fish. And it doesn't matter where it's from or anything like that either. It can be canned, it can be from fresh, and it can be from frozen. Those are all great ways to have it. If it's from canned, I do want to encourage you to rinse it before you eat it, since it's often packed with a lot of salt. But as long as you're having it at least once this week, that'll give you lots of the vitamins and minerals as well as protein that we've talked about. That's really important for our immune function in this video. So thank you all for watching. If I don't have any other questions here, which I don't think I do, I will say goodbye for this week. And like I said, this video will be going up onto our channel, so you can rewatch it. You can go back and review something I've said. And if you have any questions, you can comment or you can email June. And I'm hoping that you're all on June's email list as well, to make sure that you're getting the handout that I created for this week, as well as the recipe from Zahid's video. And I want to encourage you to look at our channel and find Zahid's video for the community kitchen for a great recipe too. All right. Well, thank you all for watching, and I will see you next week, I hope. Bye.